What's up, fam? Welcome to the BOON podcast. I'm Candice Wynn, and I am here with my brother, Robert E. Purvey. What up, bro?
I'm the best brother you got.
My real brother might have a problem with that, but
I mean, I love him too. But tell me, it's a whole competition out here.
It's a whole competition. That's so funny. Robert E. What does E stand for?
I'm not telling you.
No?
Not on the podcast. I'll tell you off air.
You don't want nobody to know.
I don't want people. No, people. Because people
Is it
petty.
Earl?
Nope. You'll never guess it.
Edgar.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I have my whole
Emmanuel?
name. Absolutely not. My whole name does not sound like who I appear to be. If you heard my whole name, you would not think short, gray bearded black man from Houston, Texas.
Everett.
Nah, you would think, a Caucasian brother from up north.
Edward.
Ethan.
Ethan.
Yeah.
Robert Ethan Purvey.
Yeah. So we're going to edit that part out.
No, we're going to keep it.
No, it's Ethan. Yeah.
Ethan. My God.
That's what it is. And it's ETHON, not ETHAN.
Oh, so your parents was ghetto with it too.
Yeah. Cause my grandpa was straight from the south of Louisiana. His name was Ethan.
Ethan.
Yeah. So my middle name is Ethan. You say Ethan.
Well, we are celebrating our 1 year anniversary.
You have
it's our birthday.
You have stuck
man.
it out for a year. You should be commended. I thank God you kept me along. I thought you were gonna get rid of me right episode 5. I don't know.
It was a little touch and go, y'all. It has been a little touch and go.
It's so cool to see this from something like that was in your heart, in your mind. Yeah. For it to come to fruition. Honored to be a part of it in this capacity. But I remember we were in Atlanta and there was a building you had rented out and we met in one of those meeting rooms. It was the first time I met Anastasia and Ashley was there. We were in the
my sister and my husband were there
yeah,
too.
we were all in the room.
Oh, that was a different time.
No, so I missed the one I came to. We had something else to do in the city. Yeah. And we met there first. I
know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so like you whiteboarded everything.
Yeah.
Everything was whiteboarded.
That.
Like, cause you're so professional.
Listen, you gotta be, you gotta be, but it is a beautiful thing. I've said this several times and I'll say it again. It is a beautiful thing to have people willing to hop on a vision and just ride with you. Like there's something so holy and so beautiful about people saying, yeah, I see your vision and I don't mind helping you bring it to life.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm grateful for you, Jess, for Ash, for Anastasia, for my sister and my husband. I mean, everybody who has been just riding with us, and so many other people who have used their time, talent, and their treasure, right? In order to make everything come to life. But we're at 1 year, and that's remarkable. We're at 1 year. This is episode 16. So we have had 16 episodes. And it's I remember something you said on the very first episode, and I said, we're doing a mini-series podcast. And I pushed that mini-series podcast, and you was like, nah, you're gonna find that people want to. And here we are 16 episodes later. Yep. And we're still going strong.
Yep. And gonna get stronger.
That's right. That's right.
Because the people want the song.
I think you said that on that first episode. The people want the song.
The people want the song.
You did. The people got the song. And for all of you all who have been riding with us throughout the course of this, just thank you for being here with us on this journey. Yeah. BOON was born out of necessity. Born out of necessity, the lack of diversity and community that I've seen. I know you've seen it too, just in your years of ministry within the next gen space. My middle name is Renee.
Come on, Renee.
Right. My mom's middle name is Renee. My middle name is Renee, and my daughter, I didn't keep it with Renee. I kind of adapted it a little bit, but it wasn't until later in life that I realized that Renee means reborn. And when I look back at my life and the many different ways that I hear God speaking to me and God moving, it's always around the area of birth. Yeah. And it's always around the area of just like being rebirth, reborn. The first sermon that I preached was from Titus, the book of Titus, chapter 3. And my first sermon was called Happy Birthday. And I didn't even make that connection until a little bit later in life. I was 9 years old the very first time I felt called to ministry. And something about the number 9 in gestation period and reborn is a way that God moves in my life and stamps and validates things for me. So this whole born out of necessity, when I first made the connection, because I don't even think I was the one that came up with born out of necessity. It might have been somebody else who was in a room who said, oh, BOON, it can stand for born out of necessity. We were like, yo, that's dope. And honestly, it probably wasn't until a year after that I made the connection born and with God and how God speaks in my life and how God moves and around that whole born piece that I really was like, yo, this is divinely inspired by God, because we are all born out of necessity to serve unique purposes in different seasons.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think that within ministry, here we go. Within ministry, I think sometimes, especially when we look at our own unique calling, and we all oftentimes think that we have a unique calling that is some sort of a maximum calling, right? An individual level of greatness, like that we're supposed to be achieving in life, and it surmounts everybody else's. Like my calling is so much greater than yours, and your calling is so much greater than yours, and your calling is so much greater than theirs. And sometimes we think like that, but I don't know that God is calling us to a maximum level of greatness. Yeah. But God is calling us to different levels of greatness. Yeah. And your calling is different from my calling, and your calling is different than the other person's calling, and the different things that our callings require us to do just look a little bit different. Yeah. Because we're all born out of necessity, and the need that we are all meant to serve within this world, and the purpose that we're meant to fulfill in this world is so uniquely different. And the things that it's going to require me to do might not be the same things that it's going to require you to do. And why does my calling require me to do certain things? It doesn't matter. Yeah. I mean, I'm not out here practicing layups because my calling doesn't require me to practice my jump shot or any kind of layups or something like that, right? That's not what it requires of me. But the things that my calling requires me to, I've got to be obedient in that. Yeah. And I'm just grateful for the way that people have come alongside of me as I have walked in all of this and worked to bring BOON and born out of necessity to life.
Yeah, it's maximizing your own individual greatness, right? It's like understanding that you're not in the competition of calling.
That's right.
Right? Like this is not a calling competition, but you are called to maximize your own individual greatness.
That's right.
You know what I mean? I think when you keep that in the forefront, the Lord begins to birth things out of you that help maximize your individual greatness, which in turns brings people along the ride. And it becomes a part of our story and a part of us maximizing what God's put inside of us. Real quick story. When I first went to college, I went to college for communications. I wanted to be on the radio. I wanted to be an ESPN sports journalist. That's what I could write very well. I sucked in math, but I could write very well. That's what I wanted to do. So I went to school. I wanted to be on the radio. I wanted to do TV. And the Lord had another direction for my life. Well, here's the thing. Even with me following God and saying yes, he presented opportunities for me to do radio. Had a radio show for 10 years. I was the public announcer for my college basketball team and football team, right? Doing podcasts and things like this. So I still get to scratch my itch of being in radio, being in communications. But that wasn't the main thing God had called me to, but it still helps me maximize my own personal greatness, right? And so it's amazing when you follow that, the things God bursts out of that. And like you said, when the name BOON came about and born out of necessity came about, it didn't click to you till a year later. Like, it ties directly to my life.
That's right.
Right. So that's what God will do. God will allow you to birth stuff that is in direct alignment with what he's called you to do.
Yeah. And that's what I want us to just dive into in this conversation today, because I know for me, when I first got into youth ministry, I don't know that I saw much longevity in it. I remember being at FAMU. I went to FAMU undergrad. I remember being a student at FAMU and feeling called to ministry. At the time, I couldn't see it. Wow. I couldn't see any longevity in youth ministry. I couldn't see any of that. I just felt, hey, this is where God is calling me to do, and I'm just trying to be obedient. So this conversation today, I want to speak directly to the person out there who feels like you are called to children's ministry or you are called to youth ministry long term, but you are trying to figure out what that looks like and how to make a lifelong career out of it, because you were born out of necessity. Yep. And if you feel like that's what God needs you to do, then you have no choice but to rock with it.
And, and every generation is going to need you.
That's right.
That's why I love the term next generation or next gen, because there will always be a next gen.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Until Christ comes back.
That's right.
There will always be a next gen, which means there will always be a need for next gen leaders.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And if that's what God has called you to do, you can't back away from that calling, because there's some kid who hasn't even been born yet who will be born out of necessity.
That's right.
And their necessity will be for you to continue doing what God has called you to do.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your story. Like, I heard you mention you studied communications in college. So tell me a little bit about how you got into ministry. What was that? What happened?
Man, we don't have time, but the time we do have, I felt the Lord really pulling on me when I was around 15, 16 years old.
Okay.
Son of a preacher, pastor. My dad started ministry later in his life. My dad started ministry late 30s, early 40s.
Okay.
My mom grew up Catholic. And so my parents had a Christian influence, but they weren't church babies, if you will.
Yeah.
And so my mom and dad really became strong in their walk in their adult years. And so I was born into a very seasoned and mature couple.
Okay.
Right. And so I began seeing my parents in ministry. My dad became pastor when I was around 10 or 11 years old. And so just really felt the Lord calling me around 16, 17 and answered the call. But then growing up in church, I felt like my calling was to just be a preacher. Right. And so at 16, 17, I know the Lord has called me to preach, but I'm echoing or mimicking the preachers that I've heard. Right. Yeah. So one Sunday I try to sound like Bishop T.D. Jakes. Another Sunday I try to sound like Jamal Bryant. Another Sunday, Noel Jones. Or another Sunday, some random guy that I like. Right. But just trying to figure out who I was, but I just knew I was called to preach.
Yeah.
And so I really didn't have an understanding of the depth of that early on.
Yeah.
I just knew I was called to preach as a teenager, and that's what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, because and that's so good that you said that, because ministry is so much more than preaching.
Yeah.
And when you talk to some people and they're like, I just want to preach. But I mean, there are some people, I guess, who are just traveling preachers, but ministry is so much more than just preaching. Yeah. It really is.
My life changing. That Candice, I realized that in college. I went to Southwestern Assemblies of God University, Pentecostal Bible College in Waxahachie, Texas, which is right outside of Dallas.
Okay.
And long story on how I found the university, but found it. And I knew God had a calling on my life, but it was there that I realized that I was so much more than a preacher. I was actually I was a reacher. I was somebody who can reach people in a very unique way. Yeah. Right. Through public speaking, through motivational talks, but also through relationships. And so I noticed it then. And so, but it was then I found I had a very unique knack with young people. Like, and maybe it was because at 13, my little brother was killed in a drunk driving accident. So I lost my little brother at 13. He was 9. And we were both a part of the Boys and Girls Club. And so I was a Boys and Girls Club kid. And I grew up in a Boys and Girls Club. And my first job was at the Boys and Girls Club. And so I worked at the Boys and Girls Club in Houston as a young teenager. And then when I went to college, I worked at the Boys and Girls Club in Ennis, Texas. And then from there, worked at the Boys and Girls Club in Arlington, Texas. So I worked at the Boys and Girls Club until I did full-time ministry. And so I realized that I had a knack for pouring into teenagers. Yeah. And but I always thought I would be a preacher that preached in church, and how I would bless the lives of kids would be at the Boys and Girls Club. I saw myself doing that till I was at least 30 because I had started speaking at other entities. The Boys and Girls Club had me speaking at different funding events, sending me to conferences and stuff like that. So I'm like, cool, I can rock this till I'm 30. I never saw ministry as an occupation. but I knew that I was supposed to pour into young people.
So when did you start seeing ministry as an occupation?
It was when the late great Dr. Kerry D. Wesley, who was my pastor in Dallas, called me one day. I was picking up dodgeballs for a summer camp, Boys and Girls Club, and he was playing with me. He said, "I want to leave the church, come get a job in the Boys and Girls Club." So I started laughing. We laughed it off. He was like, "Nah, I want to talk to you about something." He calls me to the office. He says, "I see something in you. I don't know if you've seen yourself." He said, "But I want to be the one to help cultivate that. I believe the Lord is calling you to ministry, to do what you do at the Boys and Girls Club, but also to do that at a level at the church. And I'm going to allow you to do it bigger than what you ever thought."
How old were you then?
I was 23.
Okay.
23 years old. Had no idea what he meant. And the short version of a long story is he allowed me to become this reaching person in ministry because he allowed me to reach outside the walls of the church. And I started mentoring in school districts, serving in the 4 or 5 school districts around our church. And that's where ministry took off for me, because I realized it wasn't just about preaching on Sundays. The ministry was in the mission field. It was at these schools. And that's when it changed the whole game for me. The whole game.
Yeah. So for me, it was someone saying something to me too.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how there's just a power of someone else's voice in your life at a certain point that can just turn a whole tide. Yeah. So when I first felt called to ministry at 9, and I leaned over and said to my mom, it was the pastor was opening the doors of the church. Yeah. And I said, "Hey mom, I want to go to the front of the church." And she's like, "For what? You already saved? You already a member? Like, what do you want to go to the front for?" My mom, she ain't play. Like, we ain't going up there to play around. This ain't play time, right? And I was like, "I don't know, mom. I just want to go." Yeah. And she walked with me to the front. And the pastor prayed for me. I remember the pastor's heavy hand falling on my head. And the pastor prayed for me aloud in front of the entire church, never talked to me, only talked to my mother. And then I turned around and went back to my seat. And I remember vividly, as I kept walking back to my seat, I felt like that something wasn't right, or I didn't get everything that I was supposed to get at that moment. I don't know. I say that I was 9, but it was late elementary school at some point. Yeah. And I remember feeling like my childhood faith was inadequate, and my childhood faith had me miss whatever that was that happened at that moment. So I just kept on walking and didn't really pursue that feeling until many years later, until I was about a junior at FAMU. And that's when I felt called to ministry again. I felt that same feeling again. And I was like, this is that same feeling that I had when I was 9. And I was able to connect those dots. But in my more mature life, because I was a part of a pretty strong collegiate ministry at the church, and I was, journeying pretty heavy with my pastors at the time. And I remember being able to understand that, hey, this is God calling you to ministry, and feeling like, man, this is something that I really got to lean into and explore and engage. And finally, after I, walked more confidently, accepted my calling, I never forget, it was a sermon preached by the Reverend Dr. Jessica Kendall Ingram. She's an Episcopal supervisor in the AME Church. She came to preach the story of David. And her sermon was called Delayed But Not Denied. And I was toe up. Talk about toe up. I was toe up after that sermon. I listened to that sermon on repeat. It was the CD days. Yeah. Listened to it on repeat in my car so many days. And I finally accepted my call to ministry. And my pastor said something. My pastor said something one day. He said, when you decide to go into youth ministry, he said, "I hire you as my youth pastor." And I was like, this is Reverend John White II, John F. White II, forever in debt to the Whites and the role that they played in my life. He and his wife, both of them were pastors in ministry. But he's like, if you decide to go into ministry, I'll hire you as my youth pastor, wherever I am. At whatever church I am, I'll hire you as a youth pastor. I wasn't thinking about youth ministry because as a child, I wanted to be a pediatrician because I wanted to heal children. And as a child, you're thinking, who heals children? Doctors. Wow. Very basic. When I went to high school, I discovered the world of psychology. And I was like, oh man, there's something more I can do. And I was like, I want to be a child psychologist, just healing the minds of children. And then here it is in college, he's mentioning youth ministry. And I was like, oh, so in my church, we just had birth to when you didn't no longer want to go with the kids anymore. Because I had cousins in their 20s and 30s still going to the youth fellowship in the church upstairs. We went in the basement, we was upstairs in the church, right? So we didn't have we had people who were, working with us, but it wasn't like mean, I guess they might have been our youth pastors. I don't know, right? So I never seen it or really been exposed to the potential of youth ministry being a career or it being a role that someone was uniquely assigned to at the church. So when he said that, I was just like, oh, okay. And I went into seminary and started working as a youth pastor. And then when I graduated seminary, I moved down to South Florida and was working as a youth pastor.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. And it's for me, it's so impactful that both of us had someone speaking something into us, and look at where it's taken.
I'm gonna make it even crazier for you. So when I went to college, the reason why I got out of communications, because the Lord called me to family counseling because of the trauma my family had experienced with my little brother. I wanted to be a blessing to families that were in the church and help guide them in that way.
Wow.
So your psychology, I was same realm with family counseling.
Wow.
Because I wanted to help heal families.
Yes.
So saying it's crazy,
that's
right?
so dope.
Yeah.
That is so wow. That's so wow.
Yeah.
And so you've served in youth ministry for the past 20 years, right?
Yeah.
For 20 years. And talk a little bit about the work that you do now, because I know you have your hand in a lot of pots with the 10 by 10 and Texas Baptist and still serving as next gen.
It's man, now it's crazy how the Lord allows me to do everything and they all kind of align. So at 10 by 10, it's a collaborative effort, making faith matter to students by pouring into those that lead them. And then with Texas Baptist, Next Gen Director, it's giving Next Gen strategy to our Black churches in Texas. And then with my church, I serve it part-time as youth and young adult because I want to still preach and teach.
Yeah.
The Lord was leading me into the strategist thinking era of ministry, but I like teaching and preaching.
Yeah.
So they all kind of three go together.
Yeah.
But I could not see myself doing anything other than this because this is what I'm called to do. Like, there are other things I like to do.
Yeah.
I almost had a job with the Dallas Mavericks.
Really?
I was almost to the point I could have accepted it, but it didn't feel right because I just knew it wasn't my thing. Right. I'm a fan of basketball. I actually worked for the Mavericks in retail before I became a youth pastor. Really? And so it was something else in that realm. But I'm like, I couldn't do it because like, it's deep. What I do is deeper than passion.
Yeah.
Like, I'm called to this.
Right.
And the Lord won't let me get out of it.
Yeah.
And my only prayer was that the Lord started allowing people to see me other than just a youth pastor. Right? Because the church and culture has a way of boxing in youth pastors. I want people to see me as somebody who can strategize for youth or for next gen or whatever, right? And to see before I was. But as far as being called to this, like this is what I do. And I meet so many people who use this as a step up.
Yeah.
And the church has a way of doing that.
That's
and if you work with youth, it's the step up into a senior leader role. But for me, I embraced it like, nah, this is just as.
That's right.
Yeah, but this is more important.
Say what it is.
This is more important than anything else. If we miss this stage.
That's right. What's the future of our church look like?
I mean, that's what we're struggling with now. I mean, that's why so many groups, that's why the work I do with 10 by 10, I love it so much because it's addressing the fact, young people say, we tired of this.
Yeah.
We're walking away from it. So it's and I'm meeting so many people who feel called to it, but this don't pay. This doesn't give you the lifestyle that something, but it's something that I've come to grips with. I'm like, I may not be a very rich person, but you know what this life has afforded me? I know a lot of rich people. And in money and in blessings and how they live their life.
That's
like
right.
The Lord has allowed me to do this so long. It's kids that I saw grow up.
That's right.
That are now community leaders, that are now first responders, teachers, engineers. They do so many different things. So yeah.
And you're ordained in
Baptist.
Baptist.
Yep.
Baptist. Okay.
Licensed and ordained Baptist minister.
Baptist. So I'm ordained in the AME church.
Yeah.
And I don't, walk around and be like, hey, call me Rev. Call me Rev. This is what it is, right? But I do think that there's a lot of people who, maybe everyone doesn't want to be ordained, right? And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to be ordained, that's fine. But I do think that there is a different kind of, and I might disagree with myself as soon as I finish saying this, but I think for some people, when I'm gonna stop because I don't want to. Well, I don't. So here's the thing. I think sometimes when you don't always find people serving in next gen ministry who feel the need to be ordained. Right. And you find people who, or even within the church who want, some churches have different issues with different genders and all that kind of stuff too when it comes to ordination. So I'm not going to,
because so many people feel like women can't preach.
That's right.
Or shouldn't be able to preach.
Right.
And
yes. Yeah.
Some of y'all be acting up.
Right.
Come holler at me.
So
got some words for you.
But I think that there is and I just say people who are not ordained don't have the same weight or experience the same weight of it. But I know for me, when I was ordained, they put their hands on my head and they said, take thou authority. And for me, it took me some years to walk in that authority. And I think that authority that I felt like was placed upon me and those words are so powerful because there's a weight to a calling. There's a weight to the work that we're supposed to put into this world and the seriousness that we have to take to it. And whenever I, have moments where I'm just like, man, the last episode we were talking about holding people accountable, right? And I just look at it as, what is my authority? What is my prophetic moment, responsibility in this moment? And what does it require of me in order to just fully walk into this? And I think that sometimes when you think about next gen ministry, people don't always lean into the weight of it. And they just stay because they don't look at it as big or as important. And they don't really think about the responsibility of, when they put them hands on my head, and it was heavy. And I think they did that junk on purpose, like boom, boom, all of them falling on my head. And I felt my spine start to crackle. Yeah. And my mother in the ministry, I remember she was standing behind me and she saw the weight and me kind of going down a little bit. She took her fist and put it in my back and kind of pushed me up. And it was in that moment that I felt, man, like the weight of it, but feeling supported by people. And that's what we have to have within our community is a support of each other in order to be able to handle the weight of the responsibility of the calling.
I'm going to throw the camera's going to see this mic flying across the table. It's like,
It's so real though.
The imagery you just gave, I literally saw it happening. Like the weight, the hands laid on you and your spiritual mother pushing you from behind. I saw it happening in real time in your life, but I see it in the supernatural too.
That's right.
Because that's how it should look.
That's right.
And it goes deeper than that because you're a woman. So I see my daughter.
Yep.
My 10-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And I have twins, boy and a girl. They're both 10. Of course they are. They're twins. But my daughter has a very unique calling on her life.
She does.
And had I succumbed to the traditional way of how I grew up in my Baptist environment, I miss that. And I'm calling out the Baptist folk. It's some pastors who are embracing it, but need here and there. But I miss it. And so hearing it just really brought a lot of emotions because that speaks so much volume to the authority that's given to our young women that are called to ministry, the responsibility of the leaders in our church, but also the importance of those spiritual mentors to keep pushing us. I didn't mean cut you off. You just
and like you're talking about with your daughter, like. She's 10. I was somewhere around her age when I first felt called to ministry. Yeah. And that pastor, did not say a word to me when I walked down that aisle. He leaned over, whispered to my mother. My mother whispered something back to him, never said a word to me. Wow. And I just think about if I was a young man how much more serious would they have taken me? Or even if someone would have reached out to me a week later and been like, hey, what's going on with you? Or if someone would have helped me to process the things that I was feeling and I was experiencing late in elementary school, how much earlier I would have potentially walked in my calling. Now,
you've been 12 years old in the temple.
Turning up the tables because I was that kid. But seriously though, you know, like, and if we, that's why the role of the children's pastor and the youth pastor is so incredibly important, because you have someone uniquely responsible for recognizing that child and speaking life into that child and walking along with that child and checking in with that child and saying, hey, what are those feelings you were feeling? Let's go get some ice cream. Let's go get some gelato. Let's go get whatever you want, you know, and let's have a conversation. Let me walk with you, because the potential of, and I do believe that God has ordained my life and allowed me to get to the place that I am now, despite the barriers that were put in the way. You know, despite and because of, right? The because of are the things that he's equipped me to be able to walk with it and have the wisdom to say the certain things. And the despite is like, nah, we're not going to let these doors that man has shut get in the way of you being able to walk fully in this thing that I want you to do. You know, I had so many doubts, like, am I really supposed to be preaching? Am I really supposed to be in ministry? I remember standing up at that podium at that lectern, I preached my initial sermon in December. I remember closing my eyes to pray and feeling the power of the Holy Spirit just come upon me and feeling like, yeah, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that it's our responsibility as leaders to recognize that in the youth who are around us. I got one girl who's been with me for many years. She was about, how old, Jess? How old were you? About 14, 15. She's our intern in the studio with us. She was about 14, 15 years old at Mount Hermon in Miami Gardens. And we had youth month. We called it Generation Next Month. We had the youth come into the different service to do different things. And I was like, hey, Jess, I want you to come pray. And she, okay. You know, kind of hesitant. Okay.
Just hesitant?
She was hesitant, a little hesitant, right? But she got this little confidence. So, you know, you know, we love you, Jess. But can I tell you, when she started praying, the calling upon her life, couldn't nobody deny that. And it was my responsibility at that point as her pastor to see that and to walk with her, you know, and we've been riding together. How old are you, 31? She's 31. We still rolling together. And I think that it's our responsibility as youth pastors to see that. But I think the challenge is youth ministry, you can feel stuck because there's always going to be a next generation. And sometimes people feel like they phase out, right? And they feel like, man, I've been doing the same thing for so long, you know, and not always recognizing or seeing the fruits. Not everybody is able to just be able to have one of their former youth work with them as an intern, right? And see the fruits of that manifested like that. So it can be a laborious job sometimes or calling sometimes. But for those people who are trying to figure out, you know, like, hey, how do I keep journeying in this thing? You know, like I've walked with lots of kids through different things. I've helped them to discern different things in their life. I've helped them to navigate their calling and their responsibilities in this world. And now I'm trying to get to a certain place of pouring back into the next generation. Like, any words? You don't have to be a senior pastor to do that. Because as you speak, I typed on my iPad. I don't want to forget my thought, because when it comes to the preacher part of Purvey, I don't get a lot of opportunities to preach. Now, I'll be called in to do a breakout session. I'll be called in to do some youth pastoring classes or things like that, which is cool. But my validation as a preacher is not as much because I'm not a senior pastor. That's right. If I was a senior, no matter how big my church was 20 people, 200 people, 2,000 people, if I was a senior pastor with that title, I would have way more preaching opportunities. So here's the thing I had to realize, that my calling is not just boxed into preaching opportunities, right? That the calling for me is 30% preaching opportunities, 70% equipping churches to identify and equip the youth leaders in their church
and make sure they know they don't have to become a senior pastor to be validated.
Yeah.
That there is some young man or young woman in your church or in your community that can lead young people, and that's what God is calling them to do. So churches, please don't get these beautiful, talented, amazing leaders in your church and box them into a title. Or box them into a role that you think there's the step up in senior leadership. No, they can be called to they are called to the next generation and to continue pouring into that. So I think our churches have to do a better job.
Yeah.
Our churches have to do a better job of saying, I see this in you. Yeah. And I'm not going to box you in by limiting your opportunities, by limiting your budget.
Yep.
By you see what I'm saying?
That's a huge piece of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you full reign to operate in your calling.
Yeah, and that's a huge piece of it because for me, it wasn't. So I work currently within youth ministry coaching and consulting, right, with an organization called Orange, right? Orange creates faith-based resources for churches throughout the world, right? Yeah. And I work as a youth ministry coach and consultant. I moved back to Atlanta from South Florida in 2015. And at that point, I wanted to get into coaching and consulting, but the door of opportunity just wasn't open for me. So I continued serving at another church, was there for about 4 years, went from a youth pastor to a next gen pastor there. And while I was at that church, a friend of mine, Sam Collier, what's up, Sam? Gave me a free ticket to go to a conference or a tour or something. And I went to the conference. I was like, hey, I'll go. My church ain't giving me money for it. I take this free ticket now, so he gave me free ticket to go to the conference. And I started meeting more people. And I got connected to a whole world of people that ended up getting me a job, opening other doors for me to meet more people, essentially paved the way for me to branch off and start BOON. Right. And I feel like it's one of those when your church gives you the tools, necessary resources to fund you and to fuel your ministry. It's one of those things where it's like, hey, I want to pour into you as a person, but also into this ministry within our church. And churches have got to do a better job of that because you never know who you might meet at a conference who can open a door for you. I mean, I know for me, and I'm not saying this in any kind of braggadocious kind of way, but I know for me, people that I meet at these conferences, I'm looking for talent. Yeah. I'm looking for skills. I'm looking for giftedness. I'm not saying this for anybody to come run up to me and try to impress me. That ain't where it's at, right? That's not what I'm talking about. Like, I mean, just like in casual conversation, because the general consensus within a lot of organization is, where are the good Black people doing the work of ministry? Where are they? So that's essentially how BOON was founded, because people are like, where are they? Hey, I'll find them for you. So I know I'm looking for people. So I think it's one of the best things that someone can do if they're trying to really just like advance is just go to a conference. Be within a community of people. Who do you meet there? Being willing. I mean, I'm not a networker. I hate networking. And to me, it's just so wild that God has called me to start a network when I hate networking. I could be totally okay going to a conference and walking in that conference, knowing only myself, and walking out and still only knowing myself. Like, totally good with that. Yeah. But that's not the life that God has called me to.
Yeah. And it's two sides to that, see? Like,
because that's where we met, at a conference.
Absolutely. At the Black church, in the Black church, we either have leaders that have in next gen or youth have led for years, and they are old and out of touch and are used to doing things a certain way. And we have churches who don't want to embrace, the older leaders don't want to embrace the younger leaders, and then there's no space for them.
Yeah.
But then the space that is carved out for the young leaders, they are bottlenecked what they can do.
Yeah.
Most leaders we talk to in our context, we either meet older leaders who are trying to find a way to connect with young people. We meet young leaders who have a calling, who are trying to figure out what to do. And most of their frustration is, my senior leadership does not understand the need of what I'm trying to say or what I'm trying to do. So a lot of times they end up leaving that church, going to some bigger churches, not even serving.
Yeah.
They go and join small groups, grow groups, and they serve in other ministries, and they chunk deuce at next gen because the local church was not equipped to build them, grow them, or even believe in them. So you have somebody who's walking away from what could be their calling because you did not embrace them.
Yeah.
Because one, you weren't equipped to embrace them, or you failed to embrace them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to that leader, that I said it a couple episodes ago, but if you are in a space and a place where your gift is not being utilized or exercised, but you know this is the calling God has on your life, ask God to send you to a place,
come on now,
that sees you for what you're called to do.
Yeah.
Even if that place has people that don't look like you. I'm not saying run from the black church to another church. What I am saying is look for a space and place for opportunity to do what God has called you to do, because the generation coming up, every study show it's a very diverse generation. The most diverse we've ever seen. So you're not going to just go into areas in our country that you're going to find predominantly one or the other. You got to be equipped to be diverse in a lot of areas of your teaching, preaching, and your reaching, right? So find you a place where you're seen for what you're called to do, and fight the urge to be loyal to a place. Be more loyal to your calling.
Okay. Whew.
Be more loyal to your calling than you are to a place. And here's where that comes from. You said earlier that you worked in 5 different churches. In the last 20 years, I've only worked in 3. Because, and don't get me wrong, to the people who watch this podcast, I will forever be indebted to Dr. Kerry Wesley, and I absolutely love the Antioch Fellowship Church. And I can say that name because that's where most people know me from. But I worked at that church for almost 15 years. And it's going to take me at least another 10 to outlive what I did at that church. Because that's what people know me from, right? And I will say the last few years, I was more loyal to the church than I was my calling. Because I felt it was time for me to go. I felt it, but I was more loyal to that. And God still blessed. And I was able to do some things after leaving that church, but I'm speaking from the place of don't become so loyal to a place that you aren't loyal to your calling.
My God.
If God is calling you to do this, there may be some other places he's calling you to do it at.
That's right.
And you got to be open to that. And I'm speaking to our people.
Yeah. Because
we get loyal to churches.
Listen.
And to pastors and to people. And my mama went there. My grandma go there. My auntie and them go there, and they're gonna be disappointed if I leave. So would you much rather put up with their disappointment or God's disappointment that you didn't fulfill what he called you to do? So it's the loyalty to the church that I feel a lot of people miss the opportunity to really fulfill their calling. And so that's a lesson I had to learn though. Yeah. It's a lesson I wish I learned earlier, but it's a lesson I had to learn. So when you talk about like the greatest lessons that we've learned on this journey, like what would you say one of your greatest lessons is? Because you've been in this 20 years too, right?
Yeah, I have. Man, there's a pegboard that I have beside my bed, and on the board it says few things in life are going to come free or easy. And I think one of the greatest lessons for me is recognizing that, I think I might have said this on another episode, recognizing that everything's going to cost you. Everything in life is going to cost you. It's going to cost you something. There are some things that I have had to say no to that I really wanted to say yes to. And there are some things that I wanted to say yes to that I ended up having to say no to. Everything is going to cost you. It's just a matter of whether or not you are willing to pay the price. And I believe the favor of God is definitely on my life. I totally believe that. I mean, the things that we have been able to accomplish with BOON within our first year, it's clear that it's favor. Yeah, it's the favor of God, and it's nothing else. And I am not confused about that. So I do believe that favor abounds, and grace does abound too. But you know, when it comes to getting to where I am. I am not a trust fund baby. You know what I mean? Like my family, we've had to work for it.
Yeah.
You know, we have had to work for
Get it out the mud.
That's right. You know what I mean? Like seriously.
Yeah.
And I think that when you have a goal, it's about whether or not you are willing to work for it to make it happen. I was talking with someone recently about BOON and the work that I'm doing with BOON, and I was like, man, it's like with BOON, you know how it is when you have a new person that you're dating and you talking to, and you like them and you can stay up all night talking on the phone to them because you're still excited about them. You know, when you reach 12 years in a game, married like me and my husband, it's like one of those, I see you in the morning, roll over and go to sleep. You know, like when you talking to me and I'm falling asleep in the middle of you talking. But when you know you're new in a relationship, you ain't got no problem staying up all night and talking and I feel like with the love that I have for the work that I am doing, like the things that it's costing me, I have no problem paying that.
Yeah.
I have no problem paying it because I'm getting a return on my investment.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, if the greatest lesson that I've learned is that everything is going to cost you. Yeah. But are you willing to pay the price?
Yeah. Man, we don't often do this, but I would have to say my greatest lesson is probably the same as yours. See?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to cost you something. And, we family. So, and on a healthy side of it, it cost me letting go of me. On the unhealthy side of it, it cost me some personal things.
Yeah.
And I had to go through some personal journeys because I was holding on to ministry in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
So that cost, what I'm trying to do now is teach the lesson to younger leaders. Like, don't allow this to cost you what you need the most. Quality time with people you love.
That's right.
Your family.
That's right.
Even giving your mind and energy to financial acumens on how to save and prepare your family because you're in ministry and this is not a lucrative job. How to be financially astute.
That's right.
Because if you have multiple kids, kids cost, and you have a calling that's not going to make you rich. There aren't enough speaking engagements. There aren't enough road things that will give you the money that you need to really, really give the life you want to give to you. So you have to be very more financially astute and manage your money better. So that's a lesson. If I go back and I'm a better steward of a lot of the ministry gifts I got from speaking at places, I make some better financial moves. Right? If I go back and I go home more than I went to my office, there are some things that worked out better in my family. So just some lessons I've learned is the cost is the sacrifice of me.
That's right. That's right.
And realizing that Christ paid the ultimate cost and to follow him.
Yeah. And I think, so when it comes to the financial piece, I mean, I'll go even, transparent with that. When I first had the idea for launching BOON, I'm like, man, where am I going? This thing is going to cost. How are we going to pay for this? What I started doing when I started taking BOON really seriously, all of my speaking engagements money, I put it in an account. And that became my BOON operating account. And to this day, every time I get paid, I got money from my paycheck going into a BOON account, and my speaking engagements money. It's not all going there now. Right. But I did that for like a solid year, maybe a year and a half. All of my speaking engagements, it was just going towards BOON. Because I saw the vision. It's like it's going to cost you. Like, I mean, I could have taken the money from a speaking engagement and gone and bought this and gone and did this or paid off this, paid off that. But I'm like, hey, I see a greater vision of what it is that I'm working to build, and willing to make the investment, you know, the moments when God is calling me to get up out of bed in the morning, like I love me some sleeping in, but sometimes God is like, get up,
Yeah.
You know? So it's or when times when my kids are saying, hey, come, my daughter likes to hang out and just lay in the bed and watch TV together. I'd be like, girl, do you know what I could be doing right now? Yeah. But just laying and cuddling with my daughter and watching a show, like it is all going to cost you something one way or another. And it's like, how are you willing to pay the price?
Yeah. And I said this off air to you on how your drive inspires me. And one way it inspires me is because I have to learn how to take better advantage of the small opportunities I have to chase my dream. Right? Like there are some things I want to produce on my end personally outside of ministry. And I have to take advantage of those opportunities. So BOON drives you. Yeah, it does. So you make time for Max, you make time for your kids, and you make time for BOON. Yeah. So like for me, like I have to give up some things that I do in my free time. I may have to give up golf a little bit. I may have to give up, watching my shows a little bit.
But you need that leisure though.
I do. And so what I'm saying is I think I've matured to the point to where I can time management. Yeah. But there's still some times where I do it where I could be doing something else. Yeah. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? It's not rest. This is really, it's recreation. And in this time, I could be doing something else. I have rest scheduled in. Yeah. But I'm saying maybe I can give up golf this week and do something for the brand. Yeah. And then golf. Right. It's that. And so it's
but you gotta want it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people go chasing the wrong thing. Yeah. And when you're chasing likes and followers on social, like, 'cause I mean, I see a lot of that. Like a lot of folks I'm talking to, like, man, so and so got so many followers, they got so many likes, and like if you chasing that, then you chasing the wrong thing. Yeah. And that's not, I mean, that may be motivating for you, but like I feel like it's one of those things where we have to find our why and find what naturally motivates us, because that's going to be the drive that pulls it all together. I heard someone say that purpose is what you value and your assets in a certain season. And when you take the things that you are valuing and the assets that you have, and like, hey, how are you making your assets push the things that you value? And that is how we learn to pursue our purpose in certain seasons. What do you have? Yeah. And what do you value? Yeah. And how are you willing to use what you have to push the things that you value? Yeah. And if you value, certain things that aren't ultimately edifying, but it's beautiful when the things that we value are more aligned with the things that God wants from us, then we're able to walk a little bit differently.
Yeah. So there's a quote that says, "It doesn't get easier, you just get better."
That's right. That's exactly right.
It doesn't get easier, you just get better. And you get better by embracing the hard things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Even the lessons.
So what was one of the hardest lessons you had to learn?
Man, one of the hardest lessons I ever had to learn was you got to rest. Yeah. Candice, it was a point in time I went 6 years straight without a vacation. And my body literally shut down. My body, and I'm saying everything. It's like just the lights went off. I could not move, could not think. And I was off for 3 weeks. And I didn't go nowhere. I was at home. Only thing I did was play with my kids. I was going so hard. So one of the greatest lessons to learn how to rest. Yeah. I make sure I rest. One of my best friends' name is Jeffrey Hubbard. He's a doctor, and he gave me some breathing routines and some things I can do. And he told me, I remember he came by my office one time, and he was giving me some advice, and he told me that if I could take 30 minutes a day and just cut off the phone, the TV, the lights, find some time and just breathe. If I can't find 30, find 15. But in this time, nothing. No phone, no TV, nothing. Just sit with yourself and breathe and recalibrate your body. And there's some breathing techniques I found on YouTube. It recalibrates me. Right. So that's one of the greatest lessons for me, learning how to rest.
Yeah.
Because it allows my mind to recalibrate, my body to recalibrate. And I'm actually doing more now than what I did before with more energy.
You know what? And I was talking to someone about that too. I feel like when you feel personally inspired to pursue certain things, like say if you want to make youth ministry, children's ministry a lifelong career, right? I feel as if there are certain things that you can do every week to align yourself with that. Like one of them is that rest, because I feel like if we are personally, and I know some people are like, oh yeah, but seriously, if we are personally taking care of our soul and our spirit, and we are aligned with God, then we'll be able to recognize and see the little glimmers of hope, or the doors that are opening around us that we might not be able to see with the natural eye, but we'll be able to see it with our spiritual eye. And we'll be attuned to those things because God recognizes our obedience with our personal life. And when God recognizes your obedience with your personal life and the way that you are shepherding yourself, not just shepherding other people, when God recognizes how you're shepherding yourself, then God realizes, hey, I can entrust you with more. Because God is not going to entrust you with more if you're not being responsible with the person of who you are.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think for me, there's certain goals that I set every week. It's like, hey, every week I set a different goal. I want to do this one thing. And every week is something different, something tangible. Last week, it was submit this new grant application. That was it. Submit this new grant application, cranked it out. Friday, done. Right. Every week I've got different goals that I put in place, because I recognize, hey, if I have a lot of different hats that I'm wearing, then I have got to be able to drive myself in certain ways, and recognizing what drives you. And for me, deadlines drive me, even if it's a personal deadline that I gave myself, or even if it's one of those things where it's like, hey, this week I want to reach out to somebody, send them an email and just get to know them. Check, item done. And I think that there's things that we can be doing to set ourselves up better in order to walk more fully in whatever might be next.
Yeah. It's I think what you just said is great advice to any leader.
Yeah.
It's great advice to any leader. It's realizing that you have to put some things in place.
Yeah.
To get to where you want to be.
That's right.
If this is what you're called to do, there's greater within this scope.
That's right.
That maybe you're called to next gen, but maybe you're not called just to teach Sunday school to next gen. Maybe you're called to write curriculum.
That's right.
So what are you doing to write or put yourself in the presence of people who write curriculum?
That's right.
So it's understanding that's the sacrifice.
And
that's
also,
counting the cost. It's all
that. And let me say this too. But with that point is that a lot of these curriculum companies are looking for diverse voices. They're looking. I'm telling you, y'all, they are looking for people to write. They're looking for contributors. I'm not kidding when I say this. So if you feel called to write curriculum, reach out to somebody. I mean, people are real people. Reach out to them. And I guarantee you that they're not going to turn you away without saying, send me a writing sample.
Right. But then with that, do you have the discipline?
That's right.
To actually create the sample.
That's when you create your to-do list every week. This week, this is what the thing is you do.
There you go.
Create your writing sample.
Because you cannot complain about the opportunities you don't have when you don't want to take advantage of the moments.
Yeah. And even in that, at one point in my life, and this is just a small nugget, one point in my life, I felt like if someone said, hey, send me a writing sample, I'm like, dang, I've never written anything that's been published, so I can't put anything out. But I'm like, send something or write something fresh.
Yeah.
It ain't got to be something that's been published or or a blog or something. Write something fresh.
Yeah.
But I will say though, for me, if I had to give advice to anyone who's trying to figure out how to make it a lifelong career, how to make children's ministry, youth ministry, next gen ministry a lifelong career, I would say keep waking up every morning, obediently putting one foot in front of the other. And the doors that God will open to you for you when God recognizes and sees your obedience. Because I believe that God honors our obedience. God honors it, God sees it, and God honors it. And the way that God will provide the space for you, you won't necessarily always see it right now. Because sometimes in the moment, you're not able to recognize the way that God is equipping you today for the tomorrow. And when I think about the different seasons of my life, I recognize how God equipped me at church A to work at church B, and church B to work at church C, and church C to work at church D. And how me serving in the capacity in which I am now, it is a culmination of every ministry that I have been a part of, right? And any advice, the greatest lessons, honestly, the things that I've learned, we talk about in this conversation. You follow this podcast, we talk about the things that we've learned in this conversation. And I think that if we are obediently walking and obedient to the tasks that are in front of us every day, I believe that God honors that. God honors it. Quick story, and we got to wrap, y'all. We really got to wrap. There's a girl who I'm walking alongside right now, and she said to me, and I this is something we can't make a clip. We can't make this a clip because it's going to sound really bad out of context. And I hope that you all who watch this podcast and listen to this podcast, that you know my heart well enough at this point so you don't hear the pretentious me in this. But she said something to the effect of, she's like, do you feel like you're living your dream? She's like, she looks at some of the things that I'm able to be a part of, and, you know, like speaking engagements that I might have, places I might go. And, you know, and honestly, if you follow me on social, it is so dry. You don't get a glimpse of any part of my ministry journey, hardly any of it. But she's like, do you feel like you're living your dream? And I was like, no, because my dream was to be a pediatrician. That was my dream. Like, I believe that when we are obedient to the tasks that God puts in front of us, the dreams that God will give us, and the ways that God will allow our steps to be ordered, it will open up doors and will provide us to be in a space that we could never have fathomed. I would have never imagined when I first got into ministry at 21 years old that I would one day be the executive director of a nonprofit that serves children and youth ministries on a national level. I would have never dreamed this. This is not the dream that I had for my life. Never would have dreamed this. I feel like it's one of those things that God ordained because of the ways that I have been faithful over the things that I have been given. And if we are faithful over the things that we are given, then God will make all of those dreams come to fruition. I had dreams when I was first walking in my calling in ministry. Have vivid dreams of me being in different places and doing different things. And I would see myself in certain places as an attendee. I had no idea the role in which I was actually serving in the capacity of those dreams. And I think that as long as we wake up every morning and we're obedient to the task that God has for us, then, because God isn't going to give you a glimpse of something, or God isn't going to tell you this is what you're supposed to be doing without providing the provision to make it happen.
Absolutely. I echo all that, sis. Everything that God has allowed me to do, I saw it. I saw it at some point in my ministry journey. And every time I get a chance to walk into certain rooms, do certain things, the Holy Spirit will remind me of when he showed it to me. Everything. There's nothing up until this point that I did not see or pray for that I have not been allowed to do. So I anticipate walking into the things God is showing me now. So for everybody that is called to the next gen, do what sis just said. Wake up every morning knowing that God loves you and believes in you. Put one foot in front of the other and keep going.
And write the writing sample.
Absolutely. And submit it.
And submit it. Man, this has been a great conversation. Thank y'all for joining us. We 1 year old. Happy birthday. No, what is it? I want to say happy birthday to you. And I'm not going to sing because I cannot sing. That's not my gift. But thank y'all for joining us in this conversation. Let's keep the conversation going over in our Facebook group. Head over to Facebook and find the BOON Community, or head over to our website, thebooncommunity.com. Thanks for rolling with us for this first year. And God, guess what? We got so much more to come. Peace.
A special shout out to our team for making this episode happen. This podcast was produced by Ashley Johnson. Theme song composed by GR the Great. Special thanks to our Fresh Leftovers family, Legacy and DJ, for production. Production assistant, Jessica Virgil. Edited by Jay. Co-host, Robert E. Purvey. Hosted and directed by me, Candice Wynn. And a heartfelt thanks to you, our listeners, for your continued support.